I have kind of an apology to make. I'm not sure whether it's an apology or not, but I have some problem with my elbow, and I can't reach up to tie a tie, so I didn't wear a tie today. Maybe I'm a little formal or something. I don't know what it is, but I feel kind of out of place without a tie on when I stand before a congregation. The 8th Psalm, one of the great psalms that we have in that wonderful book of songs of Israel. It tells us something about the contrast here between God and man. And so it begins by saying, "O Lord our God, how excellent is your name in all the earth." Then he says, here are things that you've done. Here is your power manifested. Here is your wisdom manifested. What am I that you should be mindful of me? I am just a speck of dust on this magnificent universe that the Lord has created. And yet evolutionists would try to tell us that we're just developed animals. They would try to tell us that we are the highest order, but that we have just evolved. I don't accept that. I accept man exactly as the Bible speaks of him. God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. No, I'm not an animal. Yes, I have animal characteristics, and maybe some people think I'm an animal sometime, but I am the creation of God, the special creation of God, and you are too. That's the reason that abortion is so obnoxious, is because it intercepts God's plan and makes man's plan to abort something that turns out to be paramount. We're living at a time when people are multiplying like everything over the world. I went back and looked at some statistics. By the year 2024, the population of the world will have grown by 100 million every year. Back in 1951 to 1961, the population grew only by 5 million in that entire decade. Well, these are UN things, by the way. How do we see man? How does man see man? Well, one thing, we're overwhelmingly complicated. The eye is such a complex little piece of machinery there that it's amazing to us. I have had kidney stones a number of times, and I began doing some reading about the kidneys. To make a laboratory that would do everything that the kidneys do, you could not get into a little bitty organ like that, and yet God created it so that it would do that very thing. The ears are the same way. The sense of smell, it's all of it's the same way. There are so many things that we don't know about the human body. Scientists are still discovering important things from time to time, and yet they find out that there are a lot of things that they can't do. How many diseases today are incurable? How many diseases have been discovered that are curable? Well, there's just all kinds of things like this that emphasize to us that man is a very, very complex creature. Now, some people think that mankind is expendable. People are expendable. And so we have a murder rate in our country that's terrible. We have people going into schools and killing small children. We have people going into marketplaces and blowing things up and blowing themselves up. And the more mankind is increased in number, the less mankind seems to think he's worth. Oh, I'm worth a great deal. But you, I don't know about, you know. God didn't create mankind on a color barrier, on an ethnic barrier, or a language barrier, or anything like this at all. We're all the children of God. I remember one time, many years ago, on the radio, long before TV ever came out, on the radio there was a story of a woman who went through terrible, terrible mental disorders, and after a number of years, when she began coming out of this, she was asked, "What have you discovered by your experiences of horrors and of terrible things that you've had to go through in this these mental upheavals?" And she said, "The most important thing that I found out was, I am a child of God. I'm a child of God. Everything else is subservient to this. Everything else is in second place. I am in second place, third, fourth, or fifth, or whatever it might be down the line. But I am not the important thing here. God is the important thing." And so, in this wonderful psalm, he begins by saying, "Oh Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth." And then he says, "I look at the universe, I see the work of your fingers." Can you almost imagine God creating this thing like that? And he says, I see the wonder of your universe. And then I look at myself and I say, what is man that you should be mindful of him? A son of man that you should visit him. This is characteristic of Hebrew poetry. To make a statement, then come back and make the same statement with just a little twist to it. What is man that you should be mindful of him, or the Son of Man that you should visit him? Well, you made him a little lower than God. Interesting thing here. In the New Testament, we have a distinct word. In the Old Testament, the word is a little bit confused here, because it can mean a heavenly being of any kind. And so it's translated in the Old Testament most of the time, you have made him a little lower than God. In the New Testament, a little lower than the angels. Well, either one, I'm not particular about that, but either one says, you and I occupy an exalted position. You and I have a dignity that has been given to us by God that we did not earn. We were simply born that way. So our children, our friends, our neighbors, our kinfolks, all of these people that we see all around us, we need to see them as people that God has created. They are not expendable. They are not riffraff. They are the children of God. Paul said in the book of Acts, when he was up on Mars Hill, he was talking to a bunch of heathens, a bunch of pagans who had idols all around them, and he said, "We also are his offspring." And he said, "You're not the offspring of a chunk of stone. You're not the offspring of a rock. You are the offspring of God." That's the thing, folks. You and I have God in us. There's a spark of divinity in every person. Don't forget that. After God created man, he said, he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. This is such an interesting word, because it's a word that can refer to the whole person. So many souls were saved, or so many souls were lost. And it's a broad word. It can mean the whole person, but it can also mean that part of us, whatever that is, that spends eternity with God. Notice he didn't talk about dogs becoming living souls. He didn't talk about horses and cows becoming living souls. He talked about mankind becoming a living soul. Well, where does that put me? That gives me a sense of dignity. That gives me a place in the whole regime of God that says, Jack, you're important. Well, I've got to view myself this way. I have to view all people that I see in this way. Whether it's a drug addict who is in the gutter or the king on the throne, we are all simply the offspring of God. Scientists can't duplicate that. Well, people say someday scientists will be able to create life. That's okay with me. That doesn't bother me a bit. If scientists create life, it just means one thing to me. They discovered another one of God's laws. You see, when man discovered that he could fly, what did he do? He just harnessed the laws of God. And so airplanes go shooting through the air all the time. We think nothing of it. If life is created of some sort, it just says that mankind has discovered one more of God's laws, or maybe many more of God's laws for that matter. Man, as we look at him, man is a dependent creature. In the United States, we don't like that idea. I don't want to depend on anything, anybody. I want to be me. I want to be myself. I don't want to have to depend on anybody. Yes, we are. We are all dependent. We're dependent on parents. We're dependent on our children. We're dependent on our neighbors. We're dependent all over the place. And I like this 46th Psalm where it said, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. Isn't that good? A very present help in time of trouble. He's our refuge. He's our strength. He, with all that he has made and all of his power and all of his wisdom and everything, he says, I have time for you. I can take care of you. When things go bad, when things go wrong, when I am upset, when I'm at a loss, God is our refuge and strength. I have an idea, maybe David wrote that. We really don't know who wrote that particular psalm, but I have an idea that David might have written that because David experienced so many things where it seemed like he was just at the end of his road. Saul was chasing him all over the country, and David was experiencing all kinds of hardships, and people turned against him, and times people tried to kill him, and the king tried twice to kill him. The Lord is my refuge and my strength. David saw something that folks, you and I need to see. We need to see that God is the source of this strength. Oh, families break up. People get tired and give up. All kinds of bad things begin to happen to us. And at those times, sometimes we say, God, where are you? When maybe we ought to turn to Psalm 46 and say, God, you are my refuge and strength. There's so many times that come in the lives of families where we forget about God. Families forget about God, and families deteriorate because of that. We need to see that man is dependent. Jesus made a great statement at the time of the temptations, in Matthew 4, when the devil said, turn these stones into bread if you're the Son of God. And Jesus said, no. Man shall not live by bread alone, but what? Every word. Every word. How much time do I spend in feeding this soul of mine? How much time do I spend in really putting it to the test to see how it applies in my life? What can I do to change my mind? How in the world can I change my life? And that's the way we ought to be reading and studying the Bible. Not just a casual reading before we go to bed and maybe go to sleep while we're reading. No, by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Well, we're finite creatures. Sometimes we don't like that. We like to explain things and understand things. And people talk about the conflict between God being all-knowing. He knows the end as well as the beginning, and at the same time, man having free will. If you look at that, there's a tough conflict there. And people have tried to explain it in all kinds of different ways. Hey, you know what? I am infinite. Excuse me, I got that wrong. I am finite. God is infinite. I cannot build a fence around God because He's infinite. But God can build a fence around me because I'm finite. I have my limitations. As soon as we explain these things, we destroy them. As soon as I understand something that is infinite, or think I understand something that is infinite, I destroy its infinity because I've now put it into finite terms. Well, what about this thing of the dignity of man? Well, love is a part of it. Learning to love. Love me as I have loved you is Christ's idea. God so loved the world is Christ's idea. If I want to think in terms of the real dignity of man, I need to think in terms of eternal love. I need to think in terms of learning to love the way God loves. Learning to love me when I'm unlovable. Learning to treat me in a way that shows my love, His love for me. That's what He did. Oh, wow. Stop and think about this for a minute. Here's somebody, the dirtiest, rottenest sinner you can imagine. I mean, he has done everything. He continues to do everything. He is a terrible, terrible, terrible individual. Christ says, I love you. I'm willing to die for you. I'm willing to die for you. Greater love has no man than this, that he gives his life for his friend. And so that's the reason that Paul says on Mars Hill, we also are his offspring. You know, it's interesting to me that when Luke, who was a Greek, by the way, wrote the book of Luke, he was a Greek. When Luke gives us the genealogies, he doesn't do like Matthew does. Matthew goes down to Abraham, and that's where he starts. He starts at Abraham. You know where Luke starts? He starts with Christ and comes all the way back to Adam, the Son of God. Adam, the Son of God. Luke is trying to show us you are the offspring of God. There is a part of divinity in you. But what about this whole idea then of how terrible it is for men to say some things about other men that they say sometimes? Over in the 5th chapter of Matthew, Jesus gave us something. You have heard that it was said by people of long ago, do not murder. Anyone who murders shall be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. And again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, he's answerable to the Sanhedrin. But if anyone says, you fool, he's in danger of hellfire. Why? Why? The word fool in the original language carries with it a much stronger idea than the way we use the word today. The word fool in the ancient language, the Greek, that word meant something that is absolutely, totally worthless in its behavior, in every aspect of it. It's very close akin in meaning, though not in etymology, it's close in meaning to the word raka. The best way I can describe the word raka is that being stupid blockhead. That's the best thing I've come up with. It means worthless. It means you're not good for anything. Now, when I say to somebody else, you are a stupid blockhead, when I say raka to someone else, what am I saying? I'm saying this is an insult against you, but it's an insult against God, because God lives in you. You are made in His image. The Spirit of God is a part of you. And now when I come along and say, you're worthless, doesn't that kind of say something about my attitude toward God? Why is it wrong to kill? It's okay to go out and kill a rabbit and eat the rabbit, kill a chicken and eat the chicken. It's okay to go out and kill a cow and eat the cow. But it's not all right to go out and eat a man, to eat a woman, to eat a child. That's cannibalism. Why? Because of the dignity of man, the elevated place that God has placed man on. And so, let's don't treat men as scornful. Let's not treat men as worthless. Let's not talk about them as if they were worthless. I grew up in the South. Great segregation in the South while I was growing up. One of the great things that I have to thank my mom and dad for is, Jack, you don't ever say anything or think anything bad about people of another race, people of another culture, people of another Jewish people, Semitic people. Why? I remember my mom saying over and over, they are the children of God. They are the creation of God. They have a soul just like you do. I thank my God. I thank my parents for teaching me that. Unfortunately, in many places and among many people, it was just the opposite, wasn't it? Maybe we're coming out of this. I certainly hope so. Maybe in some cases we have already come out of it. I certainly hope that too. But the point is that no matter who the person is, no matter what his ethnicity is, no matter what his color is, no matter what his station in life is, no matter how rich he is or how poor he is, no matter how sinful he is or how righteous he is a creation of God. Let's never forget that. Stop and think of what the world would be like. Think of what our city would be like if people always looked at other people in that way. Just think of the brotherly love that would always be there. Think of the help that would always be there. Think of the compassion. Think of the love that would always be there if we thought of all men as being the creation of God and having this dignity that Psalms 8 speaks of. Christ died for all mankind. He died because He loves us. He died because He wants us to be with Him forever. What am I doing about that? Am I responding to Him with my whole life? Sometimes we sing this song, I like it and I don't like it. All to Jesus I surrender, all to Him I freely give. Every time I sing that song, I feel like a liar. I'm not really giving Him everything, am I? That's my goal. That's what I want to do. That's what you and I together want to do. How much are we magnifying God in our lives compared to how much we're magnifying human beings in our lives? We have this great dignity, not because of how much money we have, not because of our status in life, not because of anything like that, but because we are the offspring of God. The saddest part of the entire Bible is over there in the 3rd chapter of the book of Genesis, when sin entered the world and death through sin. That's the saddest story in the Bible. Oh, we think sometime of the sad story of the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ and all that. Yes, that's sad in a sense, but it's victorious. Because that's the reason he came into the world, to give his life for you and for me. Why? Because he loved us. I'm not worthy of that love, but I am worth that love. What's the difference? I'm worth it because I'm made in the image of God. You are worth it because you are made in the image of God. Christ didn't die for a nobody. He died for all of us as somebodies. If you are not a Christian today, he wants you to respond to him in love, giving him the love of your heart because he has given you the love of his heart. He wants you to come and change your attitude, your mind. We call it repentance. He wants you to come and be buried with him in baptism and be raised from baptism to walk a new life. Sins forgiven, a new person, a new birth. That's the invitation of Christ. We're going to sing now, and if you're subject to it, we invite you to come. Let's stand together while we sing, please.